the manager of Romano's, David Romano himself, appeared at Sarah's table within minutes. He looked like a man carrying the weight of 3 crises at once, and in a sense, he was. His neatly pressed white shirt was clinging with sweat around the collar, his graying temples seemed sharper than they had a moment ago, and the lines across his forehead looked carved by years of worry, and in the last 15 minutes, they had deepened even further. He approached carefully, not with the hurried stride of a restaurant owner dealing with a problem customer, but with the tentative respect of someone who recognized he was in the presence of something unusual, almost dangerous. His steps slowed as he neared Sarah's table, like she was an unexploded ordnance, a live grenade, a weapon that had chosen not to go off but very much could. "Ma'am," he began, his voice respectful but slightly shaky, "I'm David Romano, the owner here. I just wanted to," he hesitated, his hands wringing themselves together before he forced them to still. "To thank you for handling that situation. And to make sure you're all right." Sarah, who had quietly resumed cutting into her cold salmon with the deliberate calm of someone who had lived through far worse meals in far worse places, looked up and offered him a small, composed smile. "I'm fine, Mr. Romano," she said softly. "I'm sorry the evening was disrupted." "Sorry?" His eyebrows shot up, incredulity breaking through his nervousness. "Ma'am, you probably saved us from a much worse situation. Those men," he paused, swallowing his embarrassment. "They were getting increasingly aggressive, and my staff, well, we're not really equipped to handle situations like that." Sarah tilted her head slightly, sympathy flickering in her eyes. She could still see the waitstaff in the corner, huddled near the hostess stand, whispering with anxious glances toward her. A few of them looked as though they were replaying the confrontation in their minds, realizing how quickly things could have spiraled. "Most people aren't," Sarah said gently, her voice calm but carrying a weight of truth. "And that's okay. It's not something you should ever have to deal with in your restaurant." David exhaled, as though the words gave him permission to forgive himself and his staff for freezing earlier. He nodded gratefully, then after a pause, his curiosity broke through. "If you don't mind me asking, are you? I mean, the way you handled yourself, that was." Sarah put down her fork and knife, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and met his eyes without flinching. "I'm former Navy," she said simply, answering the question he was too polite to shape directly. For a moment, David's entire posture shifted. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by respect that was almost reverence. He straightened his shoulders, like a man suddenly conscious of the gravity of the person sitting across from him. "Well," he said at last, his voice steadier now, "your meal tonight is on the house. No arguments. And if you ever need anything at all, you just let me know." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but David, sensing it, lifted a hand like a commander silencing the room. "Please," he said firmly. "It would mean a lot to me if you'd accept." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Sometimes, she realized, the greater kindness was to accept someone's gratitude rather than wave it away. David's shoulders loosened as relief spread across his face. "Thank you," he said earnestly. Then, with a smile that was still a touch nervous but far more genuine, he hurried away, likely to tell his staff that the mysterious woman in the little black dress wasn't just their unexpected protector, but someone forged in the crucible of military service. Sarah returned to her plate, her appetite only half there but her composure intact. She knew the storm hadn't passed, not fully. The confrontation was over, yes, but in the age of phones and instant uploads, the ripples were just beginning to spread. Still, for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet, even if she felt the eyes of the room lingering on her like shadows. Sarah hadn't taken more than 2 bites of her salmon before she sensed someone lingering near her booth. The presence was light, hesitant, almost trembling, nothing like the aggressive weight of the 3 men she had just faced. She turned her head and saw the young woman, the one who had been cornered earlier. She was smaller up close, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder like an anchor she hadn't quite learned to carry. Her eyes were glassy, shimmering with grateful tears she was fighting to control. "Excuse me," the girl said, her voice soft but raw with sincerity. "I just wanted to thank you. I don't I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in. Sarah studied her for a long moment. She couldn't have been more than 20, maybe 21 at most. There was something painfully open about her face, the kind of trustfulness Sarah had seen too many predators exploit. It was exactly that kind of innocence that triggered every protective instinct Sarah had built over years of service. "What's your name, honey?" Sarah asked, her tone warm, steady, like a hand on a trembling shoulder. "Emma. Emma Chen. I'm a junior at State University." Sarah nodded. "Well, Emma, you handled yourself just fine. You were clear about your boundaries, you didn't escalate the situation, and you stayed calm. That took courage." Emma blinked, stunned. "Courage?" "I was terrified." Sarah allowed herself the faintest smile, the kind that didn't dismiss Emma's fear but reshaped it. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite the fear. For a moment, Emma just stared, her lips parting as if she wanted to argue but couldn't. The words landed. They always did, because they weren't theory to Sarah, they were lived truth. "Are you really military?" Emma asked at last, almost shyly. "Navy. 6 years of service." "I thought so." Emma's eyes lit up briefly, even through her tears. "My brother's in the Marines. And he moves like you. Like he's always ready for something, even if he's just walking across the street." Sarah's chest tightened at that. The words pierced deep because she knew exactly what Emma meant. The readiness never left. It was more than habit, it was muscle memory carved into bone. Constant threat assessments, subtle shifts in posture, awareness that could pivot into action before thought had even caught up. It was both the gift and the curse of military life. "Your brother sounds like a good man," Sarah said gently. "He is." Emma smiled, then fumbled nervously, realizing her slip. "And so are you. I mean, you're a good woman. You know what I mean." She laughed awkwardly, cheeks flushing. Sarah chuckled softly, the tension easing. But Emma's face quickly grew serious again, her voice lowering. "Thank you. Really. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Sarah said firmly, shaking her head. "Just be safe, okay? Trust your instincts. If a situation feels wrong, it probably is." Emma nodded so hard her hair slipped into her eyes. "I will. I promise." Then, before Sarah could react, Emma leaned in and wrapped her arms around her in a fierce, impulsive hug. It lasted only a second, but it carried all the gratitude Emma couldn't put into words. When the girl pulled back, wiping her cheeks quickly with her sleeve, Sarah saw something. Change in her eyes. Not just relief. Resolve. Emma walked toward the exit, her steps surer than they had been, her shoulders squared as though she had borrowed a fragment of Sarah's strength and carried it away with her. Sarah watched her go, her chest tight with a familiar mix of satisfaction and melancholy. She had seen this before, on deployments, in training, in moments where her actions had saved or steadied someone else. It always felt good. And yet, it always carried the echo of a reminder, she was different. Marked by skills and scars that set her apart from the very people she protected. Around her, the restaurant began to hum again, but she could feel the occasional glance, the whispered conversations just low enough to hide words but not their meaning. Some eyes were wide with admiration. Others, with curiosity. A few, with a nervous respect, as if they weren't sure if she was dangerous or simply dangerous to the right people. Sarah sipped her wine and exhaled slowly. The mission, small as it was complete. But deep down, she knew the ripples had only just begun. Sarah was finishing the last of her wine when her phone buzzed, one of those short, insistent vibrations that never meant anything good after an incident like this. She glanced down. From Lisa, saw something on social media about a restaurant incident. "Please tell me you weren't involved." Sarah stared at the message, then lifted her eyes. Across the dining room, she clocked 2 separate tables with their cameras angled far too neatly to be accidental. Another diner was pretending to check a text while his front-facing camera framed her perfectly. A woman near the bar whispered, then pointed without pointing, the classic covert swivel, slow enough to think it wasn't obvious, not slow enough to be invisible. Sarah thumbed back a reply, define involved. The phone rang immediately. She answered. Hey, Lise. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, Lisa said, weaponizing the full name like a precise artillery strike. What did you do? I had dinner, Sarah said evenly. Some men were bothering another customer. I asked them to stop. And they didn't want to stop. And? Sarah sighed, the kind of slow exhale she used to practice before inspections. And I convinced them. Lisa was quiet for a heartbeat. There's already a video going around. Someone captioned it, "Never mess with a woman in a little black dress." It has, hold on, oh, that can't be right, 50,000 views already. Sarah blinked. 50,000, Lisa said. And climbing. You're trending on at least 3 local pages and a neighborhood forum that's usually just raccoons knocking over trash cans and angry posts about parking. Delightful. Sarah rubbed the bridge of her nose. What exactly does the video show? 3 guys, Lisa said. I mean, the angle's not perfect, but you can see 2 of them crowding that girl, and one reaching toward you, then whoosh, you move like a blade and, Sarah, did you put him on the floor in under 2 seconds? I only put one on the floor, Sarah said. The other 2 reconsidered their life choices. Well, the internet's doing its thing, Lisa said. Half the comments are queen and girl power and that's how it's done, and the other half are trying to guess what branch you served in. Someone's already posted a breakdown thread with timestamps, like notice the stance at 0:14, this is absolutely military. Sarah's stomach tightened. She imagined it, freeze frames, red circles, arm angles, foot placement, the internet's collective detective work that was half wrong and still effective. How obvious is it, you think? Obvious enough that one veteran already nailed 2 moves by name, Lisa said. Also, someone in the comments claims they recognize you from a Navy promotion photo. I don't know if it's accurate, but you know how fast that can snowball. Sarah's eyes cut back to the room. A busboy was stacking plates. The bartender was pretending to polish the same glass for 1 minute too long, sneaking looks over the rim. A table of women near the windows was smiling the kind of smile that sent warmth and danger in equal measure, the warmth of respect, the danger of attention. The kind that drew the wrong people if you weren't careful. I should head home, Sarah said. Before this turns into interviews over creme brulee. Good plan. Text me when you're in your car. And Sarah? Yeah? I'm proud of you, Lisa said, voice softening. Those guys picked the wrong woman. Despite herself, Sarah smiled. Love you too. She ended the call and lifted a hand. David Romano appeared so quickly she suspected he'd been orbiting her table like a discreet moon, waiting for a signal. Everything all right? He asked, polite but worried. His eyes kept flicking to the phone, like he expected it to detonate a news crew. I think I should get going, Sarah said, rising and smoothing the line of her black dress. It seems the evenings, excitement is migrating online. David winced sympathetically. I'm so sorry. I can ask guests to stop filming. Or I can offer you the back exit if you prefer. We have a staff hallway that. It's okay, Sarah said. It's 2024. Everything goes viral eventually. She lifted her clutch, then paused, meeting his eyes. But I'd like to leave a tip for your staff, please. And, pay for my meal. Or at least for the part before I turn it into a training demo. He shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. The meal is on the house. And I insist. He lowered his voice. You kept my staff safe. That's not a thing I can put on a bill. Then let me tip, Sarah said gently. Servers don't get paid in gratitude. David's mouth tugged into something between a smile and relief. "We can accept that. Thank you." He returned with the check presenter, but inside was only a blank credit slip labeled gratuity only. Sarah wrote generously, the way sailors tipped when they'd learned the currency of quiet kindness in a noisy world. She closed the folder and handed it back. "You want the back hallway?" David asked softly. Sarah glanced across the room. Conversations dimmed as if someone had turned a knob. The air hung with the awkward reverence that appears when people accidentally witness courage and don't know where to place it. Someone lifted a phone, and just as quickly, lowered it, as if unsure whether recording now felt like theft. "I'll go out the front," Sarah said, and the choice wasn't vanity, it was clarity. She had asked 3 men to leave the girl alone in a public room. She could walk out of that same room with her head up. David nodded once, the small military crispness of a civilian who understood a gesture for what it was. She stepped into the aisle and felt the heat of eyes along her path. She kept her pace unhurried, her posture relaxed. Neutral face, neutral hands, everything tidy and non-threatening except for the aura that no longer hid, the kind that said, without words, "Peace is my preference, discipline is my habit, and harm is a line I do not allow you to cross." Whispers braided behind her. "That's her. She's smaller than I thought. Did you see how fast she moved? I heard she's military." At the host stand, the young hostess, freckles, a neat bun listing to starboard, leaned forward. "Ma'am? I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered, eyes glossy. "We didn't know what to do." I froze. "You did fine," Sarah said. "You stayed with your team. Next time, call the manager early. The moment it feels wrong, it is." The hostess nodded like someone tucking a lesson into a pocket. "I will." Outside, the night air was cool and honest. It carried the smell of basil and rain, and the clear edge of a city that wasn't yet ready to sleep. The valet jogged to meet her, keys already in hand, the awkward exuberance of a 20-year-old replaying a moment he'd tell for years. "Your car's right up front, ma'am." Her Honda Civic slipped to the curb like a modest friend at a black tie gala. It made Sarah want to laugh, the contrast between internet myth and actual metal. The car was clean, unremarkable, deeply hers. "Thank you," she said, tipping the valet. He looked stunned at the number, then beamed, sliding the bills into his vest like a secret. Sarah opened the door and, out of habit, let her eyes sweep the street. 1, 2, 3, a couple by the fountain, a cyclist rolling past, a group of friends exiting from the wine bar next door. No tails, no shadows moving like intent. Somewhere across the street, a phone caught the glint of a street lamp, and she turned her face so the camera would get what it deserved, a woman going home. She settled behind the wheel, the quiet of the cabin swallowing the hum of the city. In the rearview mirror, her reflection looked exactly like it had that morning, professional, composed, resolute. The same person, and somehow not. She buckled, shifted to drive, then paused, palms resting on the wheel, and felt the familiar click inside herself. You can't control the story. You can only control your response. She pulled from the curb and let the city unfold around her, traffic lights like beads, crosswalks like stitches in a quilt she knew by touch. At the second red light, her phone buzzed again on the passenger seat, new notifications muttering to each other like birds. She ignored them. Focus forward. 3 seconds of breath in, 3 seconds out. She had done that on pitching decks in the black of the Arabian Sea, she could do it under the soft neon of a restaurant row. At the next light, she glanced in the mirror once more, not to see if anyone followed, but to read her own face. The calm wasn't a mask, it was earned. She'd asked for peace, then enforced it when peace was denied. That used to be a job. Now, apparently, it was content. She almost laughed at the cynicism of the thought, and then shook it off. There would be time for the world's reaction later. For now, there was the drive home. The ritual of safety. The simple comfort of a door that closed and locked, and a kettle that whistled, and a quiet where she could decide, intentionally, what to do next. 2 turns later, the glow of her apartment complex rose from a line of old Victorian rooftops, their silhouettes like a row of veterans, shoulders squared against the night. As she waited for the gate, her phone pulsed again with the urgent insistence of the century. She let it. She'd look soon enough. The gate rattled open. She rolled through, parked under the elm that shed leaves in slow confidence, and let the engine tick down. The night held steady, the kind of silence that felt earned. Sarah took one last slow breath, gathered her clutch, and stepped out. The cool hinged around her like a door closing. Up the stairs, the familiar creak on the second landing, the small scuff near her own doormat that she still hadn't bothered to sand. She keyed in, stepped inside, and listened with the training she couldn't unlearn, air pressure equalizing, neighbors' pipes chattering in the walls, the soft spin of her own refrigerator. Nothing wrong. Everything ordinary. It felt, in that exact moment, like both luxury and grace. Sarah set her keys in a ceramic bowl by the door, poured herself a glass of water, and only then dragged the laptop from the coffee table. If she was going to face whatever brewed online, she'd do it on her terms, in her space, with her breath steady. The lid opened. The screen woke. The world, predictably, poured in. There it was, the video, Tony's angle, clear enough to make a fight coordinator proud and a privacy advocate groan. Sarah watched herself move and felt the strange dislocation of seeing your own instincts in third person, how the body did what it knew before the mind wrote it down. She scrolled. The comments pulsed like a river after rain. This is what happens when bullies pick the wrong target. She tried to de-escalate. They didn't take it. She gave them chances. Never underestimate a woman who trained for the monsters and met one dressed as a man. Navy. 100%. Watch the stance at 014. Anyone know who she is? I want to send flowers and, like, money and also my eternal respect. This is what discipline looks like. A few were predictable and sour, the internet's background radiation. Some were ugly enough to earn a private screenshot and an internal file. But most were grateful. Most were relieved, as if they'd been waiting for someone to show, in 15 unambiguous seconds, that bravery could be boringly practical. No cape, no soundtrack. Just insistence that dignity matters in public. Sarah's phone lit up with a new call from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" a crisp, practiced voice asked. "Brad Coleman, Channel 7 News. I was hoping for a comment about the incident at." "I don't have any comment," Sarah said, gentle but firm. "Our viewers are very interested," he pressed. "People are calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero," she said, and the truth of it steadied her tone. "I'm someone who stepped in when help was needed. Ms. Mitchell, surely you understand the impact. Have a good night, Mr. Coleman." She ended the call. The phone rang again. She silenced it. The landline rang, she ignored that too. An email pinged, then 3 more, then a knock at the building's front door, 3 stories below, like the world trying every channel at once. Enough. She closed her eyes, palms flattened on the laptop's cool edge, and let the room breathe around her. She couldn't control the storm, she could only trim her sails. She would choose what to say, and when, and to whom. Or not at all. The door buzzer sounded again, only this time a familiar baritone came through the intercom, softened by distance and memory. "Sarah? It's Captain Rodriguez. Can we talk?" Her heart made a small, surprised turn. She pressed the button. "Come up." As she waited for the knock she knew would follow, she looked around her apartment, the art from a market in Naples, a framed photograph of her division lined up on a tarmac chalked with heat, the neat bookshelf that held manuals next to poetry. Nothing screamed military, and yet the truth was woven through the room like thread. Not loud. Always there. 3 knocks. Precise. She opened the door. Miguel Rodriguez stood in the hall in civilian clothes, but nothing could soften the studied calm of a career officer. He looked at her like he had on long ago days when storms rose over steel, assessing, patient, proud, worried. "Captain," she said. "Miguel," he corrected gently. "You're a civilian now." His eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to her. "Though based on what I saw on YouTube, some habits refuse to retire." She winced, half smiling. "You saw it." "Everyone saw it," he said, stepping inside. "It's at 2 million views and climbing." Sarah shut the door behind him, the click of the latch surprisingly loud in the small entryway. "Then I guess we should talk." Captain Miguel Rodriguez settled onto her couch with the kind of posture that betrayed decades of command, upright, still, but never rigid. Even in civilian clothes, he radiated authority in that quiet, unshowy way Sarah had always admired. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice steady. Not as a friend making small talk, but as a commander who had learned to ask the question in ways that demanded honest answers. Sarah eased into the armchair across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "I'm fine. It was just a minor incident that got out of hand." Miguel's brow rose in the way it had during debriefings when a junior officer tried to downplay something serious. "Sarah. I watched the video. 3 men were circling a young woman. You stepped in, gave them multiple chances to walk away, and when one escalated to contact, you neutralized him with minimal force. That's not a minor incident. That's textbook threat management." His words, so clear, so matter-of-fact, loosened something in her chest. She hadn't realized how badly she needed someone who understood to tell her she hadn't crossed a line. Sarah exhaled. "The media wants to turn it into a hero story. That bothers me." "Why?" Miguel asked, leaning forward. "Because I'm not a hero. I just did what needed to be done." "Sarah," Miguel said quietly, "do you know what the definition of a hero really is?" She hesitated. "Someone who does extraordinary things." He shook his head. "Someone who does the right thing when it would be easier not to. You could have stayed at your table, paid your bill, walked out. Most people did. But you didn't. That's what makes it heroic." Sarah looked away, her eyes landing on the framed photograph of her division on deployment, 20 men and women in desert fatigues, grinning despite exhaustion, the dust of the Middle East clinging to their boots. She felt the familiar tug of memory, the ache of belonging she hadn't let herself admit she missed. She tried to deflect. "It doesn't feel heroic. It feels like I couldn't leave my old life behind." "Maybe," Miguel said gently, "that's because your old life is part of who you are. Pretending it isn't, that's what's making you miserable." The truth of it hit her harder than she expected. Since leaving the Navy, she had tried to bury the instincts, to force herself into the mold of a civilian professional. But tonight proved it. The Navy wasn't just part of her past, it was stitched into her reflexes, her choices, her very bones. Miguel let the silence linger, giving her space. It was the same skill he'd used with sailors under his command, knowing when to speak and when to let someone wrestle with their own truth. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped a few times, then handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Recruitment numbers," he said. "Since your video went viral, we've had 47 calls to our office. 47 people saying they want to serve because of what they saw. 3 of them were young women who said they never thought about joining until they watched you step up tonight." Sarah blinked. "You're kidding." Miguel's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "I never kid about numbers." She handed the phone back, unsettled. "So now what?" "The internet wants me to be a symbol, the Navy wants me to be a recruiter, the news wants me to be a headline. I just wanted to have dinner." Miguel leaned back, studying her. "Sometimes the world doesn't ask what you want. Sometimes it chooses you. The question is, what will you do with that?" Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up. "Lisa, of course." "Turn on channel 7, Lisa's voice said the moment Sarah answered. "Now." Sarah grabbed the remote, Miguel watching with interest. The screen flickered to the late-night news broadcast, and there it was, her face, her name, her Navy service photo. What began as an ordinary dinner became an extraordinary demonstration of training and courage, the anchor was saying. The woman identified as Sarah Mitchell, a 6-year Navy veteran, was captured on video de-escalating and ultimately stopping 3 aggressors inside Romano's restaurant. The clip has now been viewed over 2 million times. Sarah's heart clenched as the broadcast showed her service portrait, her younger self in crisp uniform, her eyes hard with discipline, her jawline set with pride. She had thought she left that version of herself behind. Now it was on every living room screen in the city. Miguel turned the volume down but kept his eyes on her. "You can't put this genie back in the bottle," he said quietly. "But maybe you don't have to." Sarah said nothing. Her reflection on the black edge of the TV screen stared back at her, a blend of the woman she had been and the one she was still trying to become. The storm had found her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if running from it was the right move anymore. The television broadcast rolled on, replaying the clip from Romano's again and again, each angle dissected by talking heads with practiced confidence. A former Marine was breaking down Sarah's movements, pausing the footage to highlight her stance, her grip, the precision of her balance. "What we're seeing here," the man explained to the anchor, "is controlled, restrained, and highly trained action. Notice how she never overextends, she neutralizes the threat with exactly the force required. This is not instinct alone. This is discipline. This is military training at its best." Sarah muted the TV, unable to stomach another second of her life being converted into commentary. Miguel studied her. "How does it feel?" "Like I'm back on deployment and somebody forgot to tell me," Sarah muttered. She raked a hand through her hair, frustration simmering under the surface. "I spent the last year trying to fade into civilian life. Now in one night, I'm everywhere." The buzzing of her phone punctuated the silence, again, and again, and again. Calls, texts, emails, notifications. Some were from unknown numbers. Others from old friends, shipmates she hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly reaching out because they'd recognized her in the clip. She opened one email at random. Subject: a hero in a black dress. From local news desk. Message: Ms. Mitchell, we'd love to have you on our morning show to talk about your story of courage. You've inspired thousands, don't miss this chance to inspire millions. Sarah closed it immediately. Another pinged. Subject: book proposal, your story matters. From publishing agent. Message: we represent authors who've transitioned from military to civilian life. With your story gaining traction, this could be the perfect time to share your journey in a memoir. Imagine the impact. She deleted it. Then the phone rang again, her landline this time. The old school ringer was jarring, a sound she rarely heard. She didn't answer. A few seconds later, 3 short knocks rattled the front door downstairs. Persistent, Miguel said dryly. Ignore it, Sarah muttered. The doorbell buzzed. I said ignore it, Sarah repeated, more to herself than him. She poured a glass of water, trying to steady her hands. But they weren't shaking from fear, they were trembling with the weight of a choice she didn't want to make. Ignore the world and hope it passed her by? Or face it head on and risk being consumed? Miguel broke the silence. You know, when I first met you, I knew you were different. Sarah gave him a weary glance. Different how? You had that look, he said. Not just the discipline. The conviction. The certainty that you were meant to stand between danger and the people who couldn't defend themselves. That doesn't go away just because you put on civilian clothes. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. You sound like one of those recruitment ads. I sound like someone who knows you, Miguel countered. You can try to run from this, Sarah, but people already see you as something bigger than yourself. The question is, do you fight that? Or do you own it? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her eyes drifted back to the muted television where her face was frozen mid-motion in the viral clip. She barely recognized that woman, calm, controlled, decisive. And yet she knew her better than anyone. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the message icon blinked. She tapped it, reluctantly. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Commander Harris with the Navy's regional office. We'd like to commend your actions this evening. If possible, we'd also like to discuss opportunities for outreach and recruitment in light of the attention your story has generated. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." Sarah set the phone down slowly. Miguel tilted his head. And there it is. Official notice. Sarah buried her face in her hands. "This is a nightmare." "It's an opportunity," Miguel said firmly. "An opportunity to use what you know, what you are, for something bigger. You didn't choose this spotlight, Sarah. But you can decide how it shines." She lowered her hands and gave him a sharp look. "You really think I should lean into this? Embrace being a viral sensation? A symbol?" Miguel's eyes softened, but his voice carried the weight of command. "I think you already are. The only question is whether you let others tell your story, or whether you tell it yourself." The weight of his words pressed into her chest. She wanted to argue, but deep down she knew he was right. Silence wouldn't make this go away, it would only let strangers define her. Before she could reply, her phone buzzed with another text. This one from Lisa. "Sarah, #BeLikeSarah is trending. Thousands of women are sharing their own stories. You've started something, whether you want to or not." Sarah stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Started something. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the dawning realization that she was standing at the edge of a choice that could reshape her life. The phrase hit her harder than she expected. "You've started something." Sarah set her phone down, but the words stayed, etched into the quiet of her apartment like graffiti she couldn't scrub away. She turned the TV back on, if only to confirm what Lisa had said. And there it was. The news anchor's voice carried that practiced blend of awe and enthusiasm reserved for human interest stories that were beginning to break into national circulation. On social media, the #BeLikeSarah is trending tonight, with thousands of posts pouring in. Women across the country are sharing times they wish they'd had the courage to stand up for themselves, or for others, in dangerous situations. Some are calling her actions a wake-up call. Others say Sarah Mitchell represents the strength we all hope to find when we're tested. The screen filled with tweets and TikTok captions scrolling in rapid succession. I froze when a guy harassed my friend on the subway. If I'd had Sarah's courage, maybe I wouldn't regret it now. #BeLikeSarah. Signed up for a self-defense class today because I don't ever want to feel powerless again. Thank you, whoever you are. #BeLikeSarah. The way she moved, controlled, calm, no hesitation. You could tell she was military. Respect. #BeLikeSarah. My daughter saw this video and asked me if she could join karate. Guess who's signing her up tomorrow? #BeLikeSarah. Sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear little black dresses. Sarah's throat tightened. She muted the broadcast and picked up her laptop, scrolling through post after post. The sheer volume was staggering. Some were simple one-liners. Others were paragraphs, testimonials, even confessions of moments where people wished they'd acted but hadn't. There were veterans too. Dozens of them. I left the army and thought my skills didn't matter anymore. Watching Sarah reminded me that service doesn't stop when you take off the uniform. People think combat training is about fighting. It's not. It's about discipline, restraint, courage. She embodied that tonight. Proud to be a vet. #BeLikeSarah. Seeing Sarah in that video makes me want to believe I still have purpose outside the Corps. But it wasn't all praise. Mixed in were voices of skepticism, cynicism, even hostility. This is staged. No way some random woman just drops a dude like that in a restaurant. Bet she's loving the fame. Another vet looking for attention. Great, another excuse for people to record violence instead of stop it. Sarah scrolled past them quickly. She knew enough about the internet to recognize that praise and poison often traveled in the same feed. What unsettled her wasn't the criticism, it was the sheer scale. Millions of people dissecting her life, attaching meaning to her 15 seconds without ever knowing the years that forged them. Miguel watched her carefully. "You see it now, don't you?" Sarah closed the laptop, pressing her palm against the lid as though to steady herself. "I see chaos. I see momentum," Miguel said. "A spark. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to do something with it." Sarah leaned back, exhaling. She felt the weight of her sister's words echoing Miguel's. "You've started something." She hadn't wanted to start anything. But the truth was, whether she liked it or not, the world had already decided she had. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then curiosity won. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Emma Chin, the girl from the restaurant. I just wanted you to know I signed up for self-defense classes today. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like." Sarah read the message twice. A slow warmth spread through her chest. Emma wasn't the internet. Emma wasn't the Navy. Emma was real. Flesh and blood proof that her actions had changed something tangible. Another message came in. Then another. From women she didn't know. From veterans. From parents. Each one a ripple of impact she hadn't expected, hadn't wanted, but couldn't deny. Miguel smiled faintly as he watched her scroll. "This is what I meant when I said you've become a symbol. Not because you asked for it. But because people needed one." Sarah set the phone down, staring at the ceiling. "I never wanted to be a symbol." "Most heroes don't," Miguel said. "But sometimes the world doesn't give you a choice." The hours that followed blurred. She sat with Miguel, scrolling, watching, listening, as the world spun faster around her. Lisa called again, this time not frantic, but excited. "Sarah, you don't get it. People are hungry for stories like yours. They're tired of watching bad things happen and no one stepping in. You showed them it's possible." Sarah wanted to argue, but the truth pressed against her ribs like a heartbeat. Maybe Lisa was right. Maybe Miguel was right. Maybe running from this wasn't the answer. By dawn, when Miguel finally left with a firm pat on her shoulder and a quiet, "You'll figure it out," Sarah was still awake. Her living room was bathed in the pale gray of morning, her phone buzzing like a hive. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel like a leader. But for the first time, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had a responsibility to become both. 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood at the front of a crowded community center, dressed not in a uniform and not in a little black dress, but in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. On her chest was the logo of the program she had built from scratch, Be Like Sarah, Awareness, Courage, Action. She looked out at the faces in the room, young women, mothers, veterans, college students, even a few men who wanted to learn how to protect the people they loved. Some were nervous. Some were eager. All of them were here because of one moment that had lasted less than 15 seconds but had rippled across the world. "The most important thing," Sarah said, her voice calm but carrying, "is awareness. Situational awareness is your best defense. Trust your instincts. If a situation feels wrong, it usually is. Don't ignore that voice inside you." She demonstrated a simple move, how to break a wrist grab with leverage rather than strength. The room followed along, tentative at first, then stronger. Sarah corrected postures, encouraged louder voices, reminded them that the goal was never to fight for the sake of fighting, but to create space for escape and safety. In the back row, Emma Chin sat with her notebook, scribbling like she was preparing for an exam. 6 months earlier she had been the girl frozen in fear at a restaurant table. Now she was one of Sarah's most dedicated students, and one of her closest allies. Emma had started a campus safety program at State University that paired self-defense training with mental health support. Her transformation was living proof that courage could be taught, nurtured, passed on. When the class ended, Sarah lingered as always, staying behind to answer questions, stack chairs, and pack away the equipment. Emma stayed too, as she often did, hauling mats and chatting with the other students. "You know," Emma said as they worked, "when I first met you, I thought you were superhuman. Like something out of a movie. But the more I learn, the more I realize you're just," she stopped, then smiled. "Just human. And that's what makes it even more powerful." Sarah laughed softly. "Trust me, I'm as human as they come. I burn dinner, I forget laundry, I can't keep a plant alive to save my life. But I do believe in this, we don't have to be superheroes to make a difference. We just have to be willing to act when it matters." Emma nodded. "That's exactly what I tell people on campus. You showed me that. You showed everyone that." As Sarah locked up the community center and walked into the evening air, she felt the weight of the last 6 months settling into something lighter. The viral video had long since been replaced in the news cycle, overtaken by newer scandals and fresher distractions. But the movement it sparked, the workshops, the veteran program called Mission Transition, the ripple of courage spreading through countless lives, that still lived on. She checked her phone. A text from Miguel blinked across the screen. "Saw the news about your program expansion. Proud of you, sailor." Sarah smiled and typed back, "Just doing what needs to be done, Captain." His reply came almost instantly, "That's what makes you a hero." Sarah slipped the phone into her pocket and looked up at the night sky. The same stars that had guided her on deployments now looked down on her new mission. She wasn't just a veteran. She wasn't just a civilian. She was both. She was someone who had finally stopped running from her past and had learned to carry it into her future. And she wasn't alone anymore. Because across the city, across the country, even across the world, people were standing taller, speaking louder, acting braver, not to be like her, but to be like the best version of themselves. The viral video had lasted 15 seconds. But its ripples had no end. Sarah turned the key in her car door, slid into the driver's seat, and let the quiet fill her chest like a promise. Heroism, she realized, wasn't about being extraordinary. It was about ordinary people choosing to act when it mattered most. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. And that was the story she carried forward. Sarah's story reminds us all that courage doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it's a uniform. Sometimes it's a quiet woman in a black dress. Sometimes it's the voice that refuses to stay silent when silence would be easier. If this story inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next incredible story of courage and justice. Don't forget to like this video if Sarah's journey moved you, it helps us share her message with more people who need it. And be sure to watch our next video, where we'll bring you another unforgettable story that proves ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Until then, stay strong, stay aware, and never forget, courage is contagious.